When I'm coaching my staff or talking to senior stakeholders, I identify 4 elements of change which I believe need to be followed, otherwise the change probably won't succeed. The first is good communication, but not simply the what, there needs to be the why. The second is clear training and support, but not just before the new system goes in, but during any transition of a system or process and after, immediately after it's gone in. The third area is ensuring that any incentive structures, be they formal, financial ones or status-driven ones, are understood and ideally not changed, or if they're changed in an appropriate manner. And the fourth one is clear, unambiguous role modelling from senior management. The reason for the why, not just the what in change, is even if a change is being driven by something complicated, a regulatory change, more requirements about capital, growth in a distant market or whatever, the people being hit want to know. And it might not be something that they normally want to know about or want to understand, but because it's affecting their lives, this time they want to know. We shouldn't underestimate that interest. When it comes to the training and the support, the vital reason to not just do it before, but also during and after, is if, for example, you're going through a big process of change across multiple factories or multiple call centres, you're not typically going to do that all in one. You're going to do it in stages. And if you have the first stage, where as a result of the change, the efficiency in that particular factory decreases, as was expected as part of the programme, the message that's going to get out on the airwaves from the employees in that factory to their friends and colleagues and other ones is, oh gosh, our efficiency's been hit, it's a disaster, we're not sure what we're going to do, they tell us it'll get better but we're worried. And that will create a negative vibe about the change. If we can control the message so it says, oh, our efficiency's been hit, however, we're really being supported and management's very closely involved and they've got us a very clear plan for how we're going to get back to our previous efficiency levels, and that's turned a negative into a positive message. An example around the incentive structure might be that if you're going through a cost consolidation around computers and you remove a lot of the laptops, you may remove the laptop from someone who's had one for years and has an unwritten agreement with their boss that they're allowed to go home Friday lunchtimes because they have a long train journey and to work on that train journey on their laptop. If we remove their laptop, suddenly that's not open to them anymore, and that can be a real shock to the way they view their job. From a role modelling point of view, this is something everyone talks about, but is one of the areas that's most easily undermined by management just not fully thinking it through. So in the case of reducing laptops across the organisation, if everyone gets that, understands it, but then suddenly sees that senior management who never actually leave their desk with their computer have still kept their laptops, that can undermine the effect of the change. It's incredibly hard to be truly proactive about change. There's always a few examples, so maybe there's a regulatory change and we've got the 3-year warning so we can work towards it, or the board has defined a 5-year vision with clear annual steps so we can work towards those. Most change, however, comes to some extent out of the blue, and certainly typically comes just when you're not expecting it, or it's a different piece of change than you were anticipating. I worked once for a company that was very serendipitous about opportunities, so it would suddenly identify an M&A opportunity somewhere, or suddenly identify the possibility of moving a team into another country to benefit from some opportunities there. We as such were not able to be proactive at all. However, we decided that the best next option was to be reactive in an incredibly fast manner. How did we prepare for that? We took 3 steps. We said, right, we need a team that is available and is comfortable and is ready for surprises, for ambiguity, and who can just drop what they've got and dive into supporting this change. The second thing we said was, let's make sure we really understand what's going on so we get as much early warning as possible. And we built effectively an intelligence network within the organisation to have our ear to the ground so that if the business did see an opportunity, instead of it taking time to get to us through the formal channels, within hours or at most a couple of days, we were aware of what the business wanted to do, and as a change management function, we could gear up to support that. The third thing we did is we built a lot of quite detailed checklists around what we need to do if there's a sudden request to open a new office, to move a team, to do a small bit of M&A. And these detailed checklists sat on the shelf, and if something came up, we just took off the folder and we started working down the checklist. It defined the questions we should be asking, the people and bits of the company we should be involving, and even though naturally we'd need to refine it a little bit for each individual situation, it gave us a fantastic structure to start off, so from the business point of view, we were moving much faster than they ever would have expected. One area that you can potentially be on the cusp of proactivity is being ready if you think that there's a reason that you might need to go into a new marketplace that you don't know. So for example, if the board has stated growth in Asia is a strategic objective for us and we want to have half a dozen offices in there in the next 3 years, well, you know, whether it's tomorrow or a month or 6 months' time, that someone's going to come and say, help us set up an office in a country in Asia. You can also more or less start to build up a short list of the likely countries that'll be, and then you can take a number of steps. People are obviously vital. If you've got no relationships with that company, how are you going to hire contractors or start looking for perms? Well, if you find the right recruitment company there, the right headhunting firm, you can actually start to build a relationship with them ahead of the particular need. They can understand you as a company, you can understand how they work, they can understand your company culture, and so that when the need is there and you pick up the phone, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from a good relationship. In a similar way, you want to make sure you understand the regulatory requirements of that country. And at a simple level, do you know where those regulatory requirements are? Presumably on the relevant internet pages of the regulators, but are they in English, for example? If you're going into a country that hasn't published its regulations in English, do you have a way to rapidly translate 800 pages into high quality English? If you don't, it might be one step too far actually translating them in anticipation in case you then don't go into that market. But at least having identified a company who can do that translation for you puts you in a very good spot. A third area is just to understand the people within your organisation who might be suitable for supporting you if you go into that country. If you say, oh, there's a reasonable chance of going to the Philippines, if you look around your organisation, there are bound to be people who've either done work in the Philippines, potentially native of the Philippines, or if not within your organisation, within your team's personal contact network. That means you can both, ahead of any project there, start to understand a little bit about the culture, or as a second stage, saying, right, these are the people we need to reach out and contact if we do go into that market and maybe co-opt them onto our project teams, rather than spending the first 3 weeks saying, gosh, we know nothing about the culture of this country we're going into. Going through change is typically uncomfortable for people involved, and uncomfortable to the extent that for some people they actually won't want to stay in their role, or they may not even want to stay in the organisation. What's vital to any team driving a piece of change management is they identify who are the people at risk, who are those that it's not great if they leave, but it's not the end of the world, who are those we really want to hold on to throughout the whole process and into the new way of working, and those who we need to keep for the transition, even if ultimately they then decide to leave afterwards. And we need a clear, detailed plan for each of these. You only need a few key people to either actively to leave or to be actively against the change. Having senior stakeholders engaged in changes is vital. I think that's clear to everyone. The challenge is that many senior stakeholders don't really get the nitty-gritty of their business at the level that's required to facilitate the change. This isn't because they don't understand the key processes or the main aims of what their staff need to do. Of course they do. It's just they aren't close enough to the real pain points for the people on the shop floor. They're not aware, for example, that a particular system always slows down on a Friday afternoon. They may not be aware that as a result of the printer cost consolidation programme, those teams producing dashboards for the executive team are having to walk all the way across the building to the one printer that does colour A3 printing. They're not aware that the significant changes that have improved the distribution warehouse have actually created all sorts of negative knock-on impact for the people who are having to stack shelves in the store. So it's very important to make sure that they're clear and aware of these kind of details if they're going to facilitate change. Now the question is, how can we get them involved enough to do so? If you say, oh, the CEO should visit in 2 weeks' time to a particular call centre or a particular warehouse, that doesn't really help because everyone spends all their time swooping it up, making it look good, and as a result, the CEO is not actually seeing exactly how it works. So a key part of defining any change plan is to work out the stakeholder engagement right down to the level of who goes to which locations, when, at what point in the process. And this requires some quite detailed thinking. If you're, for example, going through quite an emotional change that's involving redundancies, it may be best to have less senior visits to that office and to have maybe more of the middle managers who can appear more empathetic with the situation. You also want the senior management, however, to see the potential impacts. So one example that I used very effectively in a retail situation was borrowed from the automotive industry. We took a number of senior members of staff who didn't believe that actually there were any inefficiencies that had been put into the process. We took them into a store, we gave them a pad and a pen, and we put them at different points in the store and said, stay there for 30 minutes and note down everything you observe. There was complete pushback on this, almost to the point of refusal, but we insisted. We left them there. Now 30 minutes standing in one place observing is an incredibly impactful exercise, and by the end of it, not only did they have pages of thoughts, but they also very much emotionally got the level of challenge that the shop floor staff were having to go through in order to put this change in place. My point of view is that it depends, and I'll talk you through some examples. If you've got an organisation that is constantly changing, for example constantly divesting or acquiring new bits of business, you really need to have the right organisational structure in place. So you need to say, in these cases I want a unit to be totally self-standing, so if I'm going to divest it, I don't have problems with IT, I don't have problems linking to my general ledger, etc. Similarly, if I keep adding bits to the organisation, I want to be able to add them in ways where they can immediately start to benefit the organisation. I don't need to go through a 2-year programme to link them into my back-end systems. On the other side, if you've got an organisation that is broadly staying still in terms of its shape and size, but it's refocusing itself, maybe a consulting organisation that's changing the structure under its partners, or a sales organisation that's changing its focus depending on where its customers are going. There you want to be able to very flexibly change your front line, but keep a single steady back office in place. So there you would say organisational design is important, but the organisational design is of a single said shared services function. Most of us, however, work in companies that don't fall in either of those areas. We work in companies where change is coming in small, medium-sized chunks from all over the place. And what we need to do there is make sure we've got the culture right. We need to have a change-ready culture. Now it's important to understand that change-ready culture doesn't mean everyone's standing there excited and ready for change. In most companies that's not the right answer. Sure, a few small companies or those in very dynamic industries, everyone needs to be thinking about change constantly. In most organisations, most people should be thinking about getting on with their day job, doing it in the most efficient, effective manner within the bounds and rules that they should be following. And then a small number of people should be thinking about the change that shapes it. What the culture needs to do though, when I say change ready, is it means that people need to be happy or at least accepting of any change when it does occur.